Hey everyone, I'm Alan Schimmel. You're not, and we're live on Techstrong Gang. A little take up on my, well, you got to be old enough to remember Chevy Chase on Saturday Night Live. Anyway, Happy New Year, everyone. It is 2026. My God, 2026. We're trying something new here on the gang. We're actually really live. So this isn't edited the day before or anything like this. Bear with us. You know what happens with live TV. You know, someone's going to have a mouthful of chocolates here or something, but we'll figure it out. We hope you like this new format, though. I'd love to hear any comments or thoughts you have on the live versus recorded. As I said, we're a bit in experimental video here as we head into the new year, and why not? It's going to be that kind of year. Let me quickly introduce you to our live gang members for the first show of 2026. Couldn't think of a better crew to kick it off with. I've got my friend Stephen Foskett, fresh off of Caribbean vacation. Stephen, Happy New Year.
It's great to be here live, and I'm glad I got out of there before the airspace was closed, that's for sure.
Let's not go there. But okay, I hear you. Also joining us, he looks like he's home. Happy New Year, Jack Poller.
Thank you. Happy New Year to the gang. This is wonderful to be here today.
And then, you know, our core, some of our core gang boys here. We've got, of course, Mitch Ashley. Mitchell, Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
And the Dean, Mike Vizard. Mike, Happy New Year. I hope you guys had a great Christmas, New Year holiday. I hope all of you out there had a great Christmas, New Year holiday and whatever you're celebrating. But we're back to work. And, you know, the news doesn't stop. The tech beat is marching on. It's all kinds of stuff going on. Mike, what do we got?
Well, it's been a busy holiday season. Normally things are quiet, but there's been a lot going on for the last 2 weeks. So let's just dive right in. NVIDIA struck a $20 billion licensing deal to get access to technology from Grok AI. The idea here is that they want to be able to at least either maybe, not quite clear. It might be they want to kill this thing, like an oil company investing in a solar panel company, or they actually have some concerns that maybe GPUs are not the right answer for everything in the world of AI, and they want to use the Grok AI technology and accelerators for different use cases. Stephen, I know you've been tracking this whole area for a while, but what do you make of this thing? Because it kind of feels like, I don't know what to call it, an unacquisition?
Well, I think this is called a clever acqui-hire. They are taking over Grok. Those of you who don't know Grok, there's actually two things in AI called Grok. This is the other thing that's not Elon Musk's Grok bot. GROQ is a AI startup. They're a hardware startup, also software services, of course. But, you know, Grok is a very interesting company. It's one of those firms that I've been watching closely, like you said, on our Utilizing Tech and now Utilizing AI series of podcasts. Essentially, they developed a novel AI compute platform. And again, this was founded by Google engineers, I think back in 2016. So they've been working at this for a long time. They have a lot of respect from those of us in the industry who watch the hardware space closely, because essentially they're doing what NVIDIA is not doing. Rather than developing, I don't want to say NVIDIA is generic, because of course they're doing a lot of really amazing stuff with their hardware, but their hardware is sort of general purpose. Grok's is very special purpose. And that's really what they're trying to do, is to develop special purpose hardware. And that has mainly been focused lately in the inferencing space. By purchasing or acqui-hiring Grok, essentially what NVIDIA is getting access to is all that hardware, as well as the employees, but they're leaving Grok purportedly intact in the hands, I believe, of a former CFO, which sounds to me like he's going to probably wind that company down a little bit, while keeping the Grok family over there on the NVIDIA side. Honestly, I don't expect this to be what you expect, you know, what you said about, you know, NVIDIA, the big giant, coming in here and crushing the competition, because frankly, Grok was already getting crushed by NVIDIA in the marketplace. I actually see this as an opportunity or an admission by NVIDIA that inferencing is on the rise, and they need special purpose hardware and software to do that. And Grok's got some of the best out there. And so essentially it's a validation of what Grok's been working on more than a move against them.
You know, this seems to be a pattern though that we're seeing. It's almost a new method of acquiring, right? We saw it with, what was it, Windsurf,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
right? Where I think it was Google, licensed the technology, not exclusively, same here, not exclusively. Aqua hired a lot of the brains. And Stephen, I remember being on the show with you when that deal came out. We said, well, I guess they just left someone to shut the lights. Lo and behold, about a week or two later, they sold the company for another couple $2 billion, right?
And
I
maybe Grok will be able to do that
I
with
think
whatever's
so.
left.
I think the key to it is the licensing of the technology does not give NVIDIA the exclusive use of it. They could go license or sell that technology to someone else, but you're buying it sort of without the brains. So you've got to be able to do a brain transplant to adopt that technology and carry it forward if you're the ultimate acquirer of Grok, right? But, so for $20 billion, you got to ask yourself, well, why didn't they just buy the whole thing? Well, the whole thing might have cost them $50 billion. Or, look, to NVIDIA, $5 trillion, what's $50 billion here or there? But, there's that to it.
Is this just an elaborate way to avoid a antitrust review of the acquisition? I mean, is that what these folks are really after at the end of the day?
That aspect.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's the risk isn't the antitrust division will say no to the deal. It's that it puts a different timeline on it, right? Once the regulators get involved and say, hey, we need to look at this, then you can't do anything with it until 6 months or a year from now. And at that point, you've lost all of your time to market for this. And so by doing it this way, you're getting the people you need and the technology you need immediately, and you get to start developing product with it immediately, which is in the AI field, that speed is pretty critical right now.
Oh.
Well, in a way, it's kind of a best of both worlds because they get access to the technology. They're getting the people that they want to move over. And maybe there's a follow-on deal down the road, for that deal for $20 billion. That's pretty remarkable that you're going to pay that much to get a hold of that technology. So maybe there's a secondary transaction that'll follow. Maybe it's something that they're not as worried about acquiring customers because they're going after the same ones, or maybe they are adding some new customers. You have to kind of look at that analysis.
So the question I have when you say it's a great deal for NVIDIA, but the employees, since it's not a change of control, doesn't trigger their stock valuation and their ability to earn a payout from this. So where does who gets all that money, and do the employees get any of it at all, right?
Probably not. Stephen, is there two separate AI markets kind of evolving here? One is the whole training side of the world, and then the other is this inference side. And that inference side might not be as GPU dominated as the training side.
Absolutely, there is. And if you look at companies like Google Cloud, AWS, Microsoft, I think what they're showing us is not only is there a whole disparate AI market here for inferencing and applications, but that market is really, really heating up. And that market actually has the possibility of generating revenue and cash flow. And again, I think that this is an example. Now, again, we don't know the details here, but if I was in charge of NVIDIA, what I would be doing is positioning what Grok had built as a competitor to what Google and others are successfully doing on the inferencing and application side in terms of building out cloud-based inferencing as a service for customers and trying to build another revenue stream. Essentially, that may end up being the real story here. We may see NVIDIA competing with the likes of Google and AWS, Microsoft, as opposed to NVIDIA just being a big iron supplier to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
I think we're in a new year. A new era has dawned. I think 2025 in the rearview mirror, we all foretold it as the year of agentic AI, where 2024, perhaps even 2023, was the years of generative AI. Maybe 2026 is the year of inference computing for AI. Now, keep in mind that it seems we're always a year ahead, right? We're pushing these things faster than they
At
can
least
go.
a year ahead.
Yeah. So, but the action and the money and the attention will be on inference computing for 2026.
Mitch,
I think
if that,
there's merit to what you're saying, Alan, too. And I think this is a consequence of the AI race, right? It's sometimes it's irrational behavior, sometimes it all makes sense, but a lot of people are making a lot of moves in many directions, acquiring companies, acquiring technology, doing partnerships, doing investments, all of this, and the kind of big companies, if you will, are really competing to go after the smaller companies that they can acquire a license. And I think we're going to see a fevered pitch of this happening throughout this year. This wasn't just a 2025 experience.
Mitch, I think though, follow that up a little bit further. I think the decision about what inference engine to use shifts and becomes much more of a traditional IT decision rather than the data science team per se that trains AI models. And so will we see CIOs and IT teams and DevOps teams playing a much larger role in rolling out those inference engines?
Developers already today make a lot of those decisions in part with their operations and platform engineers. And of course, GitHub and others have talked about having the ability to pick the model for you based on what the inferencing is that you're doing or what the prompting is the agent's trying to perform. So at some point that could be automated. The other third wheel in that, though, is FinOps. What's the cost-effective way to do this? Or can I groom a prompt in a way that I actually can run it much cheaper on whatever engine that I select? So I think there's a lot more intelligence to be added to that, both from a cost savings and performance perspective.
To me, it sounds like, IT's back driving this car again, but we'll see what happens.
Not going away yet. Not dead yet.
Alan, closing thoughts on this one?
I think I gave you my closing thought. 2026 is the year of inference. It'll be, I also, though, look, as a corp dev guy for a lot of years of my life, I want to follow this trend of like sucking the brains in a licensing deal rather than doing an outright acquisition. I think our next segment, Mike, and this is a great segue, is more of a traditional acquisition by the folks at Meta. And Jack, I think you're onto something there. Obviously, from a if you're a regulatory concerned company, this is maybe a little cleaner, easier, shorter time to the finish, though there are trade-offs involved. Mike, what's the deal with the Meta acquisition? Excuse me.
All right, well, let's shift the gear right now then, and we'll talk about this Meta acquisition, which acquired a startup called Manus that has been building some AI agents that are highly thought of. They are general purpose AI agents, and the idea here, I think, is that they're going to talk to other AI agents to execute various tasks, but this will become the central focus of your AI agentic experience. To me, it's an interesting move because for Meta, it means that, we're moving beyond just messaging apps and social media. It looks like we're trying to maybe start to take more control of both personal and maybe even business workflows. Mitch, what do you think?
Well, I think Meta is the middle child of the AI race companies. It's talking about the race for AI technologies. They're trying to gain creds. And so far, they're really falling quite far behind the top three, at least. And of course, the last child being the startups that are the ones that are interesting to acquire. So I'm not sure that this really changes their positioning. It gives them more functionality. And maybe it accelerates their ability to have long-running or multitask agents that they can populate across their platforms. I think that's one potential advantage that they might have, is that they can implement Manus in a way that it can be used across Instagram, across Facebook, et cetera, so that you have actually agents that not only work within those environments, but can go cross-environment. And think of Meta as more of a platform play. But that's kind of a big I'm not predicting that happening. That would be a big move, and I'm not sure Meta is ready for that.
Do you guys think at the end of the day that this might be the first thing that Meta has done that's actually going to make money for them in the AI, because everything else that they've done is an open source platform and it's an investment that they're sharing with other folks. But is this, the first revenue stream, Alan?
You know, I hate to be the one to do this right on New Year's, but we need an emperor has no clothes kind of moment here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, guys, if 2025 proved anything to us, 99.9% of these agents suck. And they're hard to use. They don't do what they say they're going to do. And if they do it, they don't do it the way we want it to. And for all the talk about agentic AI, it still seems like we're out in front of our skis a little bit on this. So what makes you think that Manus's agents are any better than the other 99.9% of agents out there?
There's one reason to think that, and that's that they're actually generating revenue. I don't want to be that guy always, and when we're talking about AI, but where's the money? Where's the revenue? Well, Manus, they took in a bunch of money, but according to what I've read, they're actually generating on the orders of $100 million annual recurring revenue. Now, again, that's not yet going to get them to the point of break even, but it's better than a kick in the head, as the man said. I'd rather have $100 million of revenue than negative $100 million, which I guess they kind of do because, well, anyway, point is they actually have paying customers. And as, Mike and Mitch and so on pointed out, this could be a signal that Meta is ready to start making money here instead of just pouring gasoline on this fire.
They're not going to get in the model business, right? I mean, that's where they've fallen behind and they're really struggling to keep up.
Yeah.
And in a way, you can argue, do they really need to be in the model business? Why don't they really emphasize their applications, their platforms, the Instagrams, Facebooks, et cetera? So maybe it's a complete shift. Now, I'm not saying they're going to go away from models completely, but this could be a pivot for them.
But I think you're right, Alan. I think you're right. It's a shift, but it's a completely different shift that you guys are missing. This is not an AI story at all. This is an ad story. Okay, ad revenue is. They look at it and they see ad revenue is going to go off a cliff because the search engine business and the ad business is going to completely be changed by AI. The question is, when's the last time you guys have done a Google search? Right. We all now use AI, and Google's seeing this too, is that the ad business is going to change completely. And so this is Meta's first attempt at figuring out how to enter the software as a service business and generate revenue and recurring revenue. It's a good way to do it in the AI space rather than traditional SaaS space. But this is their next revenue opportunity, and what happens when the ads die.
I like to come back to what Alan said and focus on this $2 billion number for a minute. So if the first rev of these AI agents truly do suck, does this mean that the cost for Manus to get to the next generation of these things is going to be in excess of that $2 billion number? So therefore, it makes sense to maybe sell out now to Meta versus going to the public markets that may not want to contribute, the kind of billions of dollars that might be required to make AI agents ultimately work. Alan, what do you think?
So I think we've got to go, not to play soccer here and kick the ball, but we got to go back to what Steven said, right? Which is, yes, Manus is generating $100 million plus in revenue. But again, not to be the old man on the lounge chair here for New Year's saying, go play in front of your own house. There's a difference between generating revenue and making money. They don't make money. And I lived through this in the .com. Most of us on here did too. We're all not spring chickens anymore. At some point, the street says, top line's not enough. Show me your bottom line. Is this a real business? And I don't care if you did $100 million. If you're losing 20 cents on every dollar you take in, it's not a good business. And so that's my fear here is, and now, from the Meta point of view, look, they have a ready-made business to drop this into in terms of ads, right? And so maybe they're not as concerned necessarily with the the financials, if you will, of Manus, because they view it as, look, they're going to turn this thing on its head, given their own position in market and ability to run ads. Jack, I would put forth that Google is an AI search today. It's no longer the Google search that we knew. It's AI search. You know, I don't remember the last time I did a Google search where I didn't just read what Gemini said. And that was my starting off point.
I'm sure Google's glad to hear that.
Well, am I wrong? Stephen, are you in the same boat? Are you still going through the old, like scrolling down?
Baby, I use DuckDuckGo. I'm a weirdo.
All right, there you go then.
But see, Alan, when you do that though, you read the AI summary. Yes, they're a search engine, but they're not getting ad money for that placement there, right? That's the business. Right.
But I think that Google made the choice of, if they don't do that, they're going to lose it to OpenAI and Perplexity and Claude.
Absolutely,
and so
which is my point, that the higher level message here is that the ad business is changing, and Google et al. And Meta cannot look at their ad business as the cash cow that funds all of the rest of their activities. That will go away over time.
Jack, they're kind of, in a way, I'm glad you brought up the whole ad part of it. It's good insight. Interesting that it's also pivoting to more of a product placement as opposed to an ad, right? You can see this in Perplexity, which is, I'll give you some YouTube videos, but also here's three different products you can go buy that does these things, right? Of course, they're making some money on that as well. So it's kind of skipping the ad, going right into, here's the answer for what you're looking for. Here's some options.
Yeah, and that's what Google has really successfully done with AI. To Alan's point, again, I was flippant by, no, I don't do that, but everybody else does. They go to Google, they look something up. Google, Gemini gives them an answer-ish at the top. And there's no reason now that Google can't use that to promote specific products, specific technologies, specific, revenue generating links. In fact, they probably already are. I don't know enough about it to know whether they are or not. But, if I was, I feel like the antitrust regulators that went after Google in previous years completely missed that Google was able to leverage the search platform just like Microsoft leveraged the operating system in the browser wars. Google was able to do that and has successfully turned the corner to the point now where Google is in the AI business, to Alan's point. I think that Meta's done the same thing. I think that Microsoft's done the same thing. And many of these companies, I think, are leveraging their previous position to be a leader in AI. And now they're looking for revenue. And that's what they're going to do next.
So I see this slightly differently. I would say that the future user experience for both Facebook and Google and everything else is going to be some type of AI agent that you're going to engage with. And then it becomes, well, which of those AI agents is going to be my dominant user experience? And then we'll be calling all these other back-end services. And I think that Google and now Meta are making a play for that, where they want to both create AI agents that will sit in front of those summaries and the search and say, here's what you're looking for, and tell me what the next thing you want me to do for you is. And I think Meta wants to be in that same position, not just for their own properties, but maybe for other properties, that a lot of this stuff on the internet today that we access is just going to become some sort of back-end service that some agent surfaces up, and we're not going to see them anymore. And there might just be, the web is 5 companies with 5 agents, and everybody else is an API call away.
There's one other angle to this too, Mike, and that's that this is a Chinese created company. Its parent company is Chinese based. They've actually founded it in China, then moved it to Singapore. So it will get it could get substantial regulatory scrutiny. It's already kind of drawn the ire of the European Union around data protection. I guess China has its own export controls. We'll see what that means. But maybe it's Zuck calling up, Donald, hey Don, let's make this transaction happen, or what? But it could.
So you're saying Don takes 15% off the top?
Well, how that's kind of the way those haircuts work. the new kind of haircuts in the federal.
Otherwise, you wind up in the Brooklyn Detention Center.
Yeah.
I think there's a TikTok script that shows how to get around that whole issue.
Well,
All right,
that's what I'm saying. Yeah, I think
You know what? I see we're descending into another level here. Let me lift this back up. Let's stop talking about AI and politics, and let's talk about good old-fashioned security. Mike, my friends at MongoDB, I love MongoDB, but I've been covering MongoDB for 15 or 18 years, and there's always this like security shadow not quite in sync with them.
This is true. And apparently, the bad guys don't take time off, because during the holidays, they were exploiting, I guess it was a known vulnerability within MongoDB, but they just decided to aggressively exploit it in unison. And the next thing you know, it's everywhere, and there's a patch being provided by MongoDB, and developers are coming into work to handle and deal with all this stuff. And it's the usual chaos and fun that goes with things. Now, Jack, you've been on the show multiple times and have said, if it bleeds, it leads. So here it is, Mongo bleed.
Yeah. Well, first off, we have to give props to whoever comes up with these, military operation names and the names of vulnerabilities. Somebody is very creative there. So yes, it is a Mongo bleed, and it is bleeding. Interestingly enough, this was not discovered by the bad guys, despite it being in existence since 2017 and living in almost every single Mongo release ever. It was discovered by security researchers that were doing a fuzzing attack, which is basically trying to feed in random inputs and see what happens. And it's a very common thing that security researchers and bad guys do. And it's something that MongoDB, if they're not doing, should be doing. It's a common, security test and validation effort. They discovered that one of the libraries used to process your network data and do encryption, decryption before it ever enters the system had a bug in it, and it didn't check the length of the length return, and so you were able to overrun buffers and extract data out of MongoDB databases without ever authenticating to the database. So that was discovered by security researchers, was given to Mongo, who created a patch, and at the same time, somebody created a proof of concept, released that proof of concept in the wild, and now people are using the proof of concept to exploit MongoDBs in the wild. So it is rated an 8+ on the CVE 10-point scale. It was given one of the last CVEs, critical vulnerabilities, last year, of which there are almost 15,000, which is just an astounding number in and of itself. And Stephen's reaction is my reaction, is like, we got to get better at this stuff. We've really just got to get better at it. Yes. So big problem. If you have the MongoDB, if you're using the cloud service that Mongo provides, I believe it's called Atlas, then you're not affected because they patch that immediately. But if you have Mongo embedded in your application, and it's very common to do so, then you need to patch your Mongo ASAP. Otherwise, you're going to lose your data.
Stephen, you're shaking your head. What's up, my friend?
Well, first off, I'm a MongoDB user, so this is concerning to me. Also, Merry Christmas. Here's a CVE that's being exploited in the wild. Congratulations on your week off. Unfortunately, I didn't hear about this until now. I think, though, that I'm not vulnerable to this. And the reason is because my setup, my web application setup, has MongoDB on a private network that is only accessible to the front-end web servers. And so I'm not sure that the vulnerability, if you can't access the MongoDB server, that this vulnerability affects everyone. Now, my question about that, Jack, is that your understanding? But also, it seems to me, I mean, from my reading, it seems to me like what they're doing is, because zlib is processed, so compressed data is processed before the authentication steps, then it exploits a zlib compression error in order to get around the authentication steps. Again, is this only vulnerable if your MongoDB web server is actually, or MongoDB server is actually accessible to outside networks, or do you think that this could be expressed through like remote code through a web server.
Yeah, so through
I'm
through an
scared,
application.
okay?
My
Reassure me.
my understanding is this is if your Mongo database is exposed directly to the internet. So somebody is crafting a transaction directly to MongoDB. It would be very, very difficult, not impossible, but it would be much more difficult to hit your application and force your application to send the bad data to Mongo and then get that all the way back out again. Not saying it couldn't happen, but I think that's less likely than just, or it's less of a issue than if your database is exposed directly to the internet. That being
Mitch,
said, it's, all bets are off once you have an exposure.
Mitch, is this the new reality? Because, a bunch of researchers, for whatever reason, decided to come up with this attack, and then they published it in the quote unquote the best interest of society. And then the next thing you know, it's getting exploited. Is this all, the timeline for all this seems much more compressed. And so basically, we're getting exploits and vulnerability disclosures as the time window is collapsing to the point where, do I have to be, if I'm a developer, continuously on guard for this stuff? I mean, is there no such thing as vacation because I got to go figure out how to patch something? What's the future like?
This is the low-hanging fruit of exploits. In other words, instead of creating something novel, it's exploit something that already exists that hasn't been patched. And if you can discover what that is and then take advantage of it. And while this is primarily internet exposed databases that are as susceptible to this attack, it can happen internally as well. If someone breaks in and gets inside the security perimeter, if you will, if there is a perimeter anymore. But I think this is an example of, you could argue that not only because of the accessibility of information, but our ability to process it. Going back to the AI story, maybe it's something you can be aided by AI of finding more of these kind of existing vulnerabilities that can be exploited. So I think if anything, the attack surface doesn't have to necessarily widen. It's just going after things they haven't exploited yet.
Look, I, for one, am happy to see just a good old-fashioned security breach story.
Is that like napalm in the morning? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, no, look, the vulnerability's been out there forever. Shame on us for not closing it down or making it, well, in Stephen's case, it sounds like it is not reachable today, but I mean, this is garden variety security work, guys.
Mm-hmm.
That it is.
Well, Jack, who should be in charge of responding to this? And I asked the question because there's been this ongoing conversation about letting security people just patch things and not wait for the developers to fix them. And then there's still developers out there who are like, don't you dare touch my application. You're going to break it.
Security is a team sport, and there is absolutely no room for walled gardens in security. If you've got a vulnerability, the first person who has the opportunity to protect your kingdom should do so, right? The guard at the front gate doesn't say it's not my turn to check badges, so I'm going to let everybody in, right? That's not the way this works, right? So I think everybody has a responsibility. And if the developer says, hey guys, I can do this much quicker than you, or I need to, in making this fix, I need to make some other fixes, I'll take care of it. That's one thing. If the IT folks say, hey, look, we have an easy, quick workaround, we'll take care of this another way. We can put a block on this. We can take it off from exposed to the internet, whatever. We'll fix it that way, right? That's the right thing to do, is to just fix the problem, because it's a known exploit. It's being exploited, right? It's a problem.
So it's hot. Yeah,
it's hot.
I don't think it's the developer.
It's not right, but
It's
regardless,
the IT team. But Mitch, you probably remember this. I'm going to say around 2005, Mitchell and I go meet with one of the 3 global CIOs of Citibank, a guy named Peter Fisher. Nice gentleman, really nice guy. Mm-hmm. And, Peter told us at the time we were trying to sell them VAM, the Vulnerability Assessment and Management Tool Mitchell led the development of. Peter told us it took him 90 to 120 days from the time a patch was available to installing that patch at Citi. Why? Because they had to make sure it didn't break anything else. Because they were more worried about the patch breaking something that was more valuable than what they were patching. To me, that expressed the conundrum of security, right? Is that we had to play those games. And so, though we knew that this was actively being exploited in the wild and we were susceptible, we didn't do anything until we made sure it didn't break anything bigger or more valuable.
I think, though, that math is changing because the cost of the breaches keeps going up. And maybe we reached a point where the patch and being applied immediately is probably less expensive than the breach is going to be than it would be if I knock the system offline. And the odds of that happening is low to medium.
Jack, you're in security. It has the arithmetic changed? Or the
I
calculus?
think it has. 10 years ago, I was working with some international, multinational biotech companies 10, 15 years ago, and they required a sign off from international headquarters to make any changes to their network configuration. So local facilities couldn't change that, which means you couldn't change a firewall rule to do a block without getting approval and getting it audited and having the whole, documentation and all of that. That's changed because it's now all automated. You use threat intelligence to do that. So I think we're becoming much more reactive, and very often you can say that the risk of an exposure is much more than just the particular incidents. Yes, somebody could extract data from my MongoDB, but there's all sorts of financial and reputational risk that comes with just having an exposure that companies are very interested in just saying, no, I'm not affected by this, right? Your data is safe with us no matter what. And yes, we had 3 hours downtime or a half hour downtime while we figured this out, but that was more important to us rather than losing your data and your trust. And so I think that equation really is changing. Again, it's somewhat domain specific, right? Industry specific. I think the financial industries are much more concerned about losing your money and your data or healthcare than, say, if it was an exposure at a manufacturing plant that makes light bulbs, right? The risk is a lot different.
So there's some additional clarifying information from Stephen and Ubuntu here. What are they trying to say here?
Well, it's funny. I think that based on what Jack was just saying, my experience is that a lot of the time management rushes out not quite ready for prime time messaging about things like this. And among those are sometimes management rushing out messages to customers saying your data is not affected, you won't be impacted by this, when they may not be sure. And then other times there are incorrect assumptions here. Now, I notice in our article and also online, there's references to this same bug affecting rsync, which is another tool that I use a lot. And in fact, I have it running right now. And yet, according to Ubuntu, later testing showed that rsync was not vulnerable to this. So I think this is an example of that sort of messaging problem where people get out in front of things, they worry about things, they read into things, and they don't yet know. It seems horrible to think that it would take months for a company to deploy a patch to a known CVE, but at the same time, we don't want to run around like chickens with our heads cut off here, worrying about, oh my gosh, my rsync server is going to be impacted by this, and that is visible to the internet, and I better go out there and find a look, which is exactly what I just did. And instead, we should probably hold off a moment and let the experts take a look at it and tell us whether things are vulnerable and whether things aren't, whether data is safe and whether it's not. I guess that's the problem with our democratized internet, right? We all are out here worrying about things, running around, spreading the news person to person without, having any kind of, hierarchy to tell us whether this is really impacting us or not.
I'm going to take the prerogative to have the last word on this one.
That's your prerogative. I
Thank
just
you,
interrupted
Stephen.
you, though, to make it.
No. I listen to what
Recursive
you're saying,
prerogative.
and I'm going to. I think one of the issues, though, the elephant in the room that we don't acknowledge is still the stigma of a security vendor acknowledging that they have a vulnerability or they were breached or caused a breach. I had a situation just this past Christmas where I was reached out to on, I guess it was New Year's Eve. That an article on one of our sites claimed there was a breach when technically, it wasn't a breach according to their technical definition. Well, I will tell you that every IT person out there would think of it as a breach when my identity and access credentials are stolen. We had a breach. When the URL of it points somewhere, you had a breach. Whether the information is hashed or encrypted, it was still stolen. Now, we need to remove the stigma of being breached or having a vulnerability. It happens to all of them. Everyone, all of us have breaches. The best thing for the security industry is to have sort of these blameless postmortems, borrow it from DevOps, blameless postmortems. It's not about who did what or who was wrong or what, those consequences are. It's about how do we make things right going forward? How do we handle these things better?
Mm.
And that's what we need to do as an industry.
Except for the fact that all those people that you used to be going to school with at St. John's and law school have a career to do. And the first thing they do is, we love these things. We're going to sue you for a breach.
Well, maybe we need tort reform.
What did Shakespeare say about lawyers? I don't remember.
Exactly. I remember. That's why I don't do it. All right. Hey, I hope you've enjoyed this live session of Techstrong Gang. It's fun doing it live, a little different, we had to do some stuff here on the fly, but I think all in all it worked. And it worked primarily because we had such a great gang today. Steven, Jack, Mitch, Mike, thanks for joining in. We're going to be live tomorrow as well. So check that out. We might even be looking at some predictions. Speaking of predictions, next week, the 15th, our Predict 2026. Join us and the Futurum advisory team with our best predictions, guesses, intuitions of what 2026 holds in store. You can register for that at techstrongevents.com. Until tomorrow, though, thanks for joining. This is Alan. We're out.